news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Wednesday, May 26th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, it's 21 degrees, and here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. Eastern Ontario Health Unit top doctor is optimistic about the vaccine rollout as long as it continues picking up steam, and is calling for folks to be a little bit patient and just wait a little while longer. Here's City News reporter Alex Gouge.
Eastern Ontario Health Unit Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Paul Roumeliotis, says the region has surpassed 60% of adults getting at least one shot, and that number is on track to reach nearly 90% by the end of June. He explains once the health unit hits about 75%, they will start to offer second doses. The doctor tells the Rob Snow Show where he anticipates the progress will reach if the current momentum keeps up.
If that continues, I do anticipate having provided a second dose to a significant amount of the population, i.e. about 70-75%, by the end of August.
Dr. Roumeliotis is calling on residents to buckle down for an extra week or two since we're still not out of the woods yet. Alex Gouge, City News.
City News time, 9:01. One of Canada's leading pollsters says results of a new survey show politicians would be wise to take a slower approach to reopening society. Leger Executive Vice President Christian Bourque says 52% of Canadians surveyed feel some level of anxiety about going back to work and back to the way life was before the pandemic. 18 to 24-year-olds showed the highest level of unease at 68%. A mix of sun and clouds, some scattered showers late this morning, a risk of afternoon thunderstorms on the way as well. We're expecting a high today of 27. Right now in Ottawa and Smiths Falls, it's 21 degrees. City News time, 9:02. An application for a tax credit for a future Porsche dealership at the edge of Vanier goes before City Council in Ottawa this morning. It comes after the committee level gave this plan unanimous support. If granted, the city would give Mark Motors $2.9 million to build the Porsche dealership. In return, they would generate $3.9 million in tax revenue after a decade. It's all part of the City Community Improvement Plan, which aims to spur economic growth. Not everyone in council is in favor of this move. Smiths Falls police have charged local MPP Randy Hillier at an anti-lockdown event at Lower Reach Park over the weekend. Police say Hillier was charged for not complying with the Reopening Act of Ontario and stay-at-home order over a meet and greet. That event was held by the MPP to hand out signs and shirts for his No More Lockdowns Canada event. 3 other people were charged at that day for not complying with the orders in place. In a statement, Smiths Falls police add those charged, including Hillier, will answer to those charges at a later court date. Amazon is going Hollywood. The online shopping giant is buying MGM. That's a movie and TV studio behind things like James Bond and Shark Tank. The hopes it would fill the video streaming service with more things to watch. Amazon is paying $8.45 billion for MGM. City News time, 9:03. A British judge has ended the trial of 2 former police officers and an ex-lawyer on the charges of perverting the courts of justice in connection to the 1989 Hillsborough soccer disaster. 96 Liverpool fans died in that disaster. Judge told the jurors today that he agreed with defense lawyers. There was not a case they could properly consider. The retired chief superintendent and 2 others were charged. Families had waged a decades-long quest to seek justice for their loved ones who died during a crush at a soccer match. The deaths initially ruled accidental. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
When the headlines say X,
he's got the Y.
it's the Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Holy cow, it's Wednesday already. Wednesday already. I am loving these 4-day work weeks. Hey, boss, this is something we could get used to here at the Rob Snow Show. 4-day work week. Maybe look into it. Good morning. Welcome to the Rob Snow Show on City News. It's a big news day. It is a big news day. It's a big news day. Doesn't matter where you look. Going to be big news today. Our friends at Rogers Television will leave the Rob Snow Show when the City Council meeting begins. They'll air it in its entirety for you this morning. What will your City Council do? Will your City Council really give a $2.9 million tax break to a Porsche dealership in the name of economic development in Vanier? Now, I would suggest to you, just, having covered City Hall for 2 decades, I would suggest to you the answer is yes. Because it sailed through the committee. The Fedco committee is the most powerful of all the city committees. It's kind of like the cabinet of Ottawa City Hall. And on the Rob Snow Show, we've had 2 members of that committee, 2 councillors, Eli L. Shantiri, Alan Hubley. They've been on the program in the days since that vote, and they both defended their vote. They voted for the grant. And the mayor has defended it. And that's probably all you need to know. He commands the majority of council. He's the mayor. That's probably all you need to know about how this vote is going to go today when it comes up for a vote at the full City Council. A $2.9 million tax incentive to Mark Motors. You know the story. Mark Motors going to build a $17 million dealership for high-end vehicles near Montreal, Saint Laurent. Some new staff will be hired, and the city says at the end of the term, 10 years, we're all going to come out ahead on this when it comes to taxes, property taxes to the tune of $1 million. But since the day this story broke from Kate Porter at the CBC, I have heard from all kinds of people. I mean, left-wingers and right-wingers. I mean, Ian Lee and Sean Menard do not usually see eye to eye on a great many things, but they agree on this one, that it's wrong. I've heard it from all kinds who think it's all kinds of crazy that the city would give a grant to a Porsche dealership in Vanier. And without fail, they could all think of $2.9 million other things to spend $2.9 million on, especially in Vanier. But outside of the City Council, there aren't too many people going to the mat for Mark Motors on this one. And it's really a shame, I think, how the lefties have tried to, well, let's face it, what have they tried to do over the last couple of weeks here? They've tried to shame this local business that has a 60-year history of being nothing but a model family-owned business in Ottawa. But nevertheless, people over Porsches. That's what was trending yesterday in Ottawa on Twitter. People over Porsches coming up for a vote today. We will be listening in here at City News, and Rogers Television will have it for you. Blow by blow. It'll be interesting to hear how some of the councillors try to spin this one. And then we're gonna sink our teeth deep into federal politics today. We love talking politics on the Rob Snow Show. Every Wednesday, we help you score your political fix. And we have 2 of the best political analysts in the country on our show this morning. Karl Belanger, he's more on the left side of things. He used to work for a guy named Jack Layton. And Jason Lietaer is more on the right side of things. He used to work for a guy named Stephen Harper. And there's a lot to cover. Yesterday, in what passes for the House of Commons these days, MPs almost unanimously promised, by way of a motion, there won't be an election until the pandemic is over. Well, who decides when the pandemic is over? This was a block motion. It had all party support, and the language of this motion, and it's a motion, it's not a bill, it's just a motion. The language says the government is to, quote, make every effort to ensure that voters are not called to the polls as long as this pandemic continues. That's what it says in the motion. What does it mean for the timing of the next election is another question altogether, and I want to ask you about that today as well. What do you think that means for the timing of the election? Because quite honestly, I don't think it means all that much. I mean, let's face it, we have a fixed election law in Canada. that says that we have a fixed election law that says the next election isn't supposed to be until October of 2023. And yet for most of this year when we talk federal politics, and for some of last year as well when we talk about federal politics, what do we talk about? When is Mr. Trudeau going to call the election? Is Mr. Trudeau going to call the election? A snap election. So I think despite whatever this motion says, and it passed through the House yesterday rather easily, I still don't think he can rule out an election. Late summer, early fall. Especially now, with things looking up, people feeling better. And some provinces saying it's not going to be a 1-dose summer, it's going to be a 2-dose summer. You can bet that's music to Mr. Trudeau's ears. And everywhere, let's face it, everywhere Mr. Trudeau looks, he sees conservatives who can't get out of their own way or have failed to launch. As I said in my commentary this morning, my Snow and 60 commentary this morning on Shea 106, whatever happened to The Resistance? You remember that? The Maclean's magazine cover? The Resistance, Mr. Trudeau's worst enemy. Well, Scheer is done, gone. Kenny is fighting his own people more than he's fighting the New Democrats these days. Doug Ford, here in Ontario, has watched an 18-point lead disappear in less than 2 months. In Manitoba, Brian Pallister has had to call Mr. Trudeau and ask for help fighting COVID in Manitoba. Lonely Scott Moe in Saskatchewan seems to be the only provincial conservative who has it together these days. Aaron O'Toole's leading a federal conservative party that can barely crack 32% in the polls. There was a poll this month. It had the Liberals at 40%, okay? It had the Liberals at 40%, 13 points up on the Conservatives. So if you're the Prime Minister, who cares about a motion from the Bloc Québécois? If you're the Prime Minister, one of your great political advantages is you decide the timing of the election. And I just don't see how Mr. Trudeau can possibly resist taking us to the polls, summer or fall. And his out will be, well, I think the pandemic is over. That's what it said in the motion. When the pandemic is over, the pandemic's over. So let's have an election. And I also want to ask you today, and why don't we get into this during the talkback hour, okay? I looked at all the polls this morning that were released in May as May draws to a close. Every one of them has the Liberals in the lead, without fail. Why is that? All of the polls, without fail, without a doubt, without question, they all indicate Mr. Trudeau and the Liberals will win the next election, and they might even win big. Especially now that Mr. Trudeau has gone full-on, all-in on Quebec nationalism, giving his nod to Quebec's desire to unilaterally amend the Canadian Constitution. Who really cares about how that might resonate in the rest of Canada? There's an election to win, and Quebec is key to the majority government. Right? They all put Trudeau in the lead. Why is that? Why is Trudeau winning? Why is Trudeau winning? All the polls say he's winning. Let's think about this, okay? Is it because of Mr. Trudeau's deft handling of the economy, his ability to balance a budget and keep taxes low and keep the cost of living affordable for the middle class and those working hard to join it? Is that it? Is it because of Mr. Trudeau's so squeaky clean record on ethics and integrity in government? Is it because of Mr. Trudeau's stellar, world-class, world-beating vaccination program, a program that has seen 95% of the population still waiting to be fully vaccinated? Fully vaccinated, some 5.5 months after the first shots went into the first arms. I mean, that's the track record. And yet his government, his leadership on the cusp of another election win, maybe the biggest one yet for him. I'm looking for an explanation. You may be surprised to hear that I have a few ideas of my own. We do the Talkback Hour every morning, just for days like today. Take the pulse of the audience, find out what you think on the big issues of the day, and hey, who will govern us for the foreseeable future? It's kind of the biggest one of them all. Talkback Hour, 10 to 11 this morning. Give me a call, 750-1310, 750-1310, 613-750-1310. Email The Rob Snow Show, ottawa.citynews.ca. Ask around. It's the hottest hour of talk radio in town. What else is in the mix? Valley View, Bruce McIntyre here from the Eganville Leader, Ottawa Sun's columnist Sue Sharing. We'll also talk about Joe Biden going after our milk. Leave our dairy farmers alone, Joe. And our forestry industry. You already killed the Keystone XL pipeline. You haven't lifted a finger to help us out on Line 5 with the governor of Michigan. Joe Biden, my fellow Canadians, how do you like me now? And the latest, coming up next, the latest in our fight against COVID-19 and when children could go back to school and why they should go back to school, joined momentarily by Dr. Paul Roumeliotis from the Eastern Ontario Health Unit on the Rob Snow Show on City News.
This affected us big time because when, you know how we are seasoned. We have clothes for the spring, clothes for the winter. That time, lots of clothes didn't arrive on time from Europe or from here because some factory shut down. So, and this put us in an odd position. We received not all the merchandise, part of the merchandise. And people, and for us, we have to be careful, you know, especially with the virus going on. Like, did affect the business, of course, like everybody else. We're not immune, and since the government helped, you know, this did a little bit good for us too, but still affected all the sectors, especially clothing. You know, you can see big corporation affected bad because nobody was like thought it's gonna be like this. You know, earthquake might happen, we joke about it before, things might happen, but this was like a third war, but with a virus. So how to survive, that's the question, and we're doing our best to work with the mall, especially rent in a mall is very high. The government, they have certain, let's say, condition, like how many people will be in the mall or in the stores, etc. Yeah, it's a big factor, but of course, if my store has a back doors, or just will be better, it will be much better. At least we can have curbside much easy, because we have to shut down completely, you know. And this left a mark on us, on everybody too. People always ask me, go online. Certain things you can't go online. Let's say T-shirt, certain product people don't know how to fit, but when it comes to clothing, like it's different completely. Let's say I have a customer comes, you can give him 44, but certain suit he might take 42, certain suit he might take 46. So, and how could, I mean, suit is not gonna fit the same. And I see people come back and they show me what they got online and not the same fabric. Mostly young people, but if you really wanna shop, you have to go to the store because everything will be around you. You wanna be sure the color look good, the fit will look good, especially when you spend, doesn't matter how much money, 300 or 2,000, you know? You have to try, you have to see what's going on. Please don't be shy, contact us. It will be a pleasure for me to take a suit or coat or anything. Like sometimes people have a funeral, they have things, they have a wedding, they don't want to come to the mall. If I get all the information, I will go and meet them at their home or their business offices. I'm gonna start doing that, you know, and this will help the business and help the people. Like they're afraid to come to the mall for time being, or they're too busy at work. They cannot go anywhere at a certain time, so I'm glad to do that.
Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Well, there was some good news in the fight against COVID-19 in the Eastern Ontario Health Unit. No cases reported there yesterday. So this is an area that covers Cornwall, Hawkesbury, the United Counties. And the medical officer of health is Dr. Paul Roumeliotis, who joins me once again this morning on City News. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob.
Well, that's very welcome news for your health unit. What do you make of the current situation there?
Well, I was pleasantly surprised when my staff called me to tell me that there were no cases, and I asked them to check again, and they did, and there were no cases. It's the first time this has happened in months. This is very welcome trends that we're seeing, Rob. Our numbers now had been stuck in terms of the 7-day average just above the red zone for about a week and a half, and it was stubbornly going down. But now we've finally seen a trend downwards into what I call manageable levels, into what the previous color code was, yellow-orange territory, which is something that we hadn't seen in literally months. And so this is a very good trend in my what I think is going to be really a good sort of foundation for us being able to reopen safely in the next couple of weeks as per the provincial provinces guidelines. So it was very welcome, and it was something that we were expecting, and I think it's a tribute to our population that has really adhered to those public health measures.
Okay, I was going to ask you, and maybe you can expand on that a little bit. Why do you think you achieved that yesterday?
I think that people have not gotten the message. They did stay at home. They tried as much as possible to limit their mobility, and I think that is the key. You staying at home and limiting your mobility, it gives the virus little opportunity to spread, and so that's what we're seeing. And we know that lockdowns and those type of things work because they limit mobility, and that's exactly what we had seen. I know that it came at a cost. I know that people couldn't socialize. I know that they missed Mother's Day and Easter and those type of things, and I know that our businesses are suffering, but I think it was a worthwhile exercise because I do believe, coupled with the fact that we're now increasing our rates of vaccination, this will be the last lockdown. So it's worth taking the time and just that extra bit of sacrifice just so we can make sure that we don't look back and just move forward to have a better summer and an even better fall.
You're not declaring victory yet. You're not going to have a parade in Cornwall, are you?
No. What we're going to be doing is saying, we're not out of the woods yet, but we're getting there. And I'm just saying a bit more patience because I know that everybody around us is opening. Quebec is opening, and the United States are opening. But we had significant amount of cases in our area. We had a significant amount of hospitalizations and admissions and outbreaks, and I'm happy to say that all those have gone down as well. And so all the trends are going in the right direction, and it's worth an extra week or two just for buckling down a bit more, so we can then really enjoy the openings that are coming. Step 1 and step 2, and step 3, obviously, as we vaccinate our population, which is going very well as well.
Okay. What is the situation in your health unit with vaccinations? It's province-wide, it's more than 50% of adults have been, vaccinated with at least one dose. What's the situation in your health unit?
Right now, we're at 60%. 60% of our adults have been vaccinated as of yesterday. By June 12th, we will have vaccinated 77% of our adult population, and by June 26th, we'll have done about 88%. So we're doing very well. And these are numbers based on the vaccines that I know that I'm getting and already booked to happen between now and the third week of June. So we're doing quite well in terms of first doses right now.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So what's the plan for second doses?
The plan is as soon as we saturate, I call the saturation level, probably we're in around 75% range, we will start to offer second doses. And I know that the ministry is working on it provincially to start decreasing those intervals. We'll start by age groups, so people should stay tuned. If they do have a second appointment, chances are very, very high that we will be moving it up. But stay tuned. We don't have any news on that. I'm optimistic that if all goes well, if we continue with the rate of flow of vaccines coming into our area, and our abilities continue, which they are, we're vaccinating multiple rinks at once, on a daily basis. If that continues, I do anticipate having provided a second dose to a significant amount of the population, i.e. about 70-75% by the end of August.
You think by the end of August, 75% of the population in your health unit will have received a second dose?
Yeah, provided that we do get, supply comes in as promised, yes.
Would you say that is ahead of where you thought you would be by that time?
Yes, actually, I was hoping that we would be there because I was hoping that we'd be able to offer first doses to everybody by the end of May. We haven't achieved it 100% yet, but it is something that I was hoping. I was hoping that by school re-entry in the fall, that we'd have a significant amount of the population vaccinated twice. I was counting on that even before the numbers that I have now, because I know what the numbers are, I know what I'm getting, because I did anticipate, and we were told that we would be getting a lot of vaccine over the summer months. So based on those facts and our ability to ramp it up, both in terms of number of vaccines that we can distribute at one clinic and our ability to hold multiple clinics at the same time across our area, I think those, from the logistic point of view, it's very possible.
What is the population of your health unit?
It's about 210,000,
okay.
But if you look at adults, there were 167,000 18 plus and 181,000 12 plus.
Okay. It doesn't sound like this is an issue. Are you running into vaccine hesitancy? And if so, it doesn't sound like it. But
not at this point. We're up to right now. We're almost 100. Over 95% in the older age groups. We're now at 80% in the 60 to 69s, and we're getting there as we see our clinics fill up. We're seeing the numbers go up in terms of people of age groups, and so the age groups as they get in are getting younger and younger. So I'm not sensing any hesitancy. I do think that the younger the people are, there might be more hesitancy, but not at this point. The way we're looking at it, at this point we've got all ages booked, but it's kind of early for me to tell you that we have any hesitancy. For sure not at this point.
So, Doctor, let me ask you, because, there are some people worried about blood clots, AstraZeneca, all the news and the conflicting and confusing messages that have been on display throughout the vaccination program. For people who may be hesitant to get a shot, what would you say to them? What would you say to them?
I would say that the risks of getting COVID are far more serious and outweigh the risks of getting any vaccine, and I would promote people getting the vaccine that's available to them. We see it time and time again, young people dying of COVID, and so it's a myth to say that, I'm young, I'm fine, COVID will be very mild. So I think people should heed to the advice and look at what's happening around us. Try to vaccinate yourself and your loved ones as quickly as possible with any vaccine that's available to them.
Okay. What do you think should happen with school?
I think that schools should reopen. I think we're ready for it at a regional basis. I know that my colleagues across the province agree. I wrote a letter as the chair of the Council of Medical Officers of Health, co-signed by the CEO of the Sick Kids, to Minister Lietaer last week, requesting that schools reopen, citing the immeasurable benefits that this will give our kids, even if it's for a month. I think it's taken a big toll on kids, mental health and socializing, etc. I think parents are also stressed, as you've seen from a recent Carleton study, and I think that it would be a good thing for kids to go back to school based on a regional basis. Obviously, I think maybe Toronto may lag a bit because of their increasing numbers, although they're going down. But I do think that is the time for kids to go back. They can socialize, meet their friends, have some sense of normalcy, close off the year in a normal way, close off the desks, bring the stuff home, have a nice summer, get vaccinated. Everybody will be vaccinated, going back to school, 12 and above, in the fall, and they'll go back into a much different and more pleasant, I would say, and a more normal environment in the fall.
So even though there's a month left, you still think it's worth the effort to
Oh, yes, I do.
reopen schools?
Yes, I do. And I think from what I'm seeing on Twitter and what I'm seeing on social media and what I'm seeing that people have embraced that. In fact, we have, like I said, I have spoken to the Chief Medical Officer of Health. We had a meeting on vaccines over the weekend with the Premier, who was on the call, and myself and a few other colleagues asked him about it and reiterated our zeal for schools to restart. He said that he would be listening to us and would take it back and discuss it with the Minister of Education. The Minister of Education, has reached out to us as well, asking our opinion. So all the opinions are that they should open, albeit perhaps maybe staggered if Toronto and GTA are a bit behind in terms of the cases going down. But I think that there is a lot of support for the benefits of even a month of return back to school.
Yeah. So look, you mentioned Dr. Paul. We all hope this is the last lockdown, right? What's the biggest risk right now? That we would have to go through all this.
The biggest risk at this point is variants coming into our country that may be resistant to the vaccine. Although so far we're good. And to me, that's the biggest risk, and people not adhering, and people returning too quickly to normal. That would allow the virus another chance to bring a fourth wave. I think that's the risk. And so as long as we continue to be very cautious and people understand that when they get the first dose of vaccine doesn't mean they can go out and party, without masks and so on, and that we take our time to reopen slowly but surely as we increase the vaccination rates, both first and second, I think we'll be able to avoid any resurgence. I want to be clear, Rob, that we're not going to get rid of COVID. Like, we're going to have cases of COVID. The trick is that it's not going to go into our vulnerable populations, like our elderly and senior homes and so on. Most of them are protected. And that they will not overwhelm our healthcare system or our public health system. We're still going to be in a worldwide pandemic by the time we start to reopen and have the majority of our population vaccinated twice. And so we still have to be careful, but it'll be a much more manageable until the virus itself fizzles out worldwide, which won't happen this year for sure.
Okay. Thank you. You have lots of good news to share this morning. It's nice to hear from you.
Thank you very much, Rob.
One for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Just about 9:35 on Wednesday, May 26. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa and in Smiths Falls, 22 degrees. It feels like 27, and here's what's making news this hour. Chief Medical Officer of Health for Eastern Ontario says that region is over 60% of adults vaccinated with at least one shot. Dr. Paul Roumeliotis says once they get to 75%, they will start offering the second dose to people. Rollout this morning suggests younger Canadians are more anxious about life after the pandemic than older adults. The Lietaer and Association for Canadian Study poll found 52% of respondents feel somewhat anxious about going back to their normal lives. The figure jumps to 68% for those who are between the ages of 18 and 24. An outspoken critic of provincial lockdown measures has yet another court appearance scheduled. Independent MPP Randy Hillier charged by Smiths Falls Police for a gathering over the long weekend to hand out pamphlets and T-shirts for his No More Lockdown Canada events. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
The world is changing.
So keep up with Rob.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's time to score your political fix. Karl Belanger is here, President Traxxion Strategies. Good morning, Karl.
Good morning.
Jason Lietaer is back with us. He's the president of Enterprise Canada. Good morning, Jason.
Hey, Rob.
Well, it's great to hear from both of you. When is the election, Karl?
Not this spring, not this summer, maybe this fall.
Maybe this fall. Okay.
I think that's still a likely scenario, despite the motion that was adopted in the House of Commons saying no election during a pandemic. But what is a pandemic? When does a pandemic end? Is that when there's no more cases? Is that when there's no more, safety measures in place? When is it? I think the government will go when it needs to go, and I'm thinking that the fall window is still the best for it.
So we still could have a 2021 election, you think, Karl?
I believe so. I believe so. I think it's. I think it'd be better for Justin Trudeau. I mean, why give time for Erin O'Toole to get his stuff together? Why give time for the NDP to organize better? It won't get any better than the fall.
Okay. Jason Lietaer, when is the election? When do you think the election will be?
Mid to late September. I was not a proponent of, but I expected the Liberals to call one this spring. The truth is, they had planned to call one on the heels of their budget for May. The third wave really snuck up on a lot of people, including them. They won't sort of admit it publicly, but the plans were in place to walk over to Governor General, dissolve Parliament and have an election. I expect them to sort of follow that same plan. Once, quote, second doses are getting in arms, and I think there's a reason why they're saying things like, we plan to have offered everyone a second dose by the end of sort of August, September, those kinds of things. So
2 dose fall. 2 dose fall.
That's the current plan. It changes. It's changed 2 or 3 times now, and I don't blame them for that. I think Karl's bang on in terms of what the right window is. I think I've said this a couple of times, but I think Mr. Trudeau sort of beats himself up for not having taken the initiative and called an election last fall when he had a chance. And I think he thinks he'd win one, and I think that's probably true. Yeah.
So, is that window closing? Or?
Well, it's not that the window's closing. It's that Karl hit it bang on. Okay. The conditions are pretty good for Mr. Trudeau, despite the fact that there's general dissatisfaction with governments generally. But you don't want to give your opponents too much time to change the narrative. He actually wants to have an election when things are still a little uncertain. When things are certain and we're sort of through this for sure, then, the calculus might start to change to how are we going to pay for all that happened in the last couple of years.
Then you're Winston Churchill.
You don't want that election.
Then you're Winston Churchill.
Exactly.
Thanks for winning the war, buddy.
The other thing is that with every jurisdiction reopening and a reopening plan starting now in some areas, the economy would get going. Jobs will be created. Money will flow. Things will be good before they get worse. So why wait for a possible downturn? And why wait for a possible, God forbid, fourth wave with some variant that resists to the, half vaccinated population. So the window is there. That's the sweet spot, and I think Jason is exactly right. Mid-September, that's the sweet spot.
So this is it's post-Labor.
I know going to move on, but an interest rate hike, a potential interest rate hike is something that could really cool things off. And I think you don't want to sort of mess. The Bank of Canada is sending a lot of signals. It's going to have to do something to cool down the housing market at some point. And I think that's something that you would want to have an election well before something.
Okay, so I mean, we picture it all. Labor Day long weekend has come and gone. The little ones are back in school. Most, if not all, of those eligible for a second dose have had their second dose, and Trudeau has fulfilled his vaccine pledge. Let's go. Right? That's the narrative now, I guess. Right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. We're going to, I think, lean a lot on Karl right now to explain it all to us as a keen observer of what's going on. I just want to say what's going on. What is Justin Trudeau up to with his support for Legault's Bill 96 in the Constitution question? Karl.
Well, isn't it for a majority? And if he goes against it, then he puts his majority on the line in Quebec because everybody else is in favor. And the issue that the Liberals are facing right now is that the share of the electorate that could care or does care about Bill 96 in a negative way, these people, Anglophone in Montreal and other places in Quebec, already vote for the Liberals. Where else are they going to go? However, Franco voters, could go any kinds of ways, and the Liberals need to retain a good chunk of those CAC supporters that have voted Liberals in the last election, and therefore, certainly before there's a majority, before he has a majority, he will not oppose Bill 96, just as he has not intervened against Bill 21 on religious symbols. Even though he could and probably should. And
none of the others did either. Right?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And the thing is, if Erin O'Toole or Jagmeet Singh were going to stand against Bill 96, then it could create something uncomfortable for Justin Trudeau in the rest of Canada. But because they don't, what's the option? What's the political option? Now, it may lead to the rise of the Maverick Party somehow if discontent rise up in the West, but that will also help the Liberals. So there's not a lot of upside for the Liberals to oppose this bill at this point. That may change once they get a majority.
Okay. What's your reading of it, Jason?
Well, I think Karl's the expert in these things, and I think he's got it bang on. And I think he's right to go back a little ways. Like when you think about Trudeau's, he's been prime minister now since 2015. It's been a while. He really, he has gone out of his way to not fight with Quebec. In fact, quite the opposite. Number one, he's a Quebecer. He's told us a number of times. Sometimes we don't want to listen, but I go back to some of those sort of funny clips of when before he was fully formed, and I'm a Quebecer. Of course, we're better than everybody else. Like all those sort of funny clips that circulate every time on Twitter every time he does something like this. And listen, he's Legault's running at 80-90% support, and Trudeau's got an election coming up. Trudeau and Legault's asking for stuff, and he's going to get it. That's just the way it goes, and it's not right. It seems to me that these messing with sort of constitutional change, that's how we get in real trouble as a country. But the Liberals are playing small ball instead of the big picture, and I think Trudeau's dad would probably, be sitting in his grave on some of this stuff.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
If there's anybody that sort of, used to stand up on this kind of stuff and just stand up for the country rather than regional interests, it was him. But here we are. He's got an election to win, and Francois Legault wants something, and he's going to get it.
How dangerous could this be, though? The blowback in the rest of the country? Do you think, Jason, there will even be blowback in the rest of the country?
Well, I mean, if I would worry about, he's already lost everything he's going to lose in Saskatchewan and Alberta, and those are the places where the first blowback happens. The lower mainland of British Columbia, my experience has been the most likely. Ontario is just sort of like, okay, you treat our sort of crazy cousin over there, how you got to treat them. Like, that's been my experience with the sort of politics of Ontario. Is Ontario doesn't get too worked up about it. Certainly not swing voters in Ontario, the 905. BC, sometimes my experience has been there's a little bit of, like, let me put it this way, and I'd be interested in Karl's take on this. Back in the coalition crisis of 2008, as a conservative, the place where we got the most traction with, an alliance with the separatists, can you believe, sort of Quebec's going to have a veto over all this kind of stuff, was actually British Columbia, Vancouver, and the lower mainland of BC, which is an electoral battleground. So that's the only place that I'd be worried about if somebody really made an issue of it. But it's tough to make an issue of this stuff without being really, really, really controversial.
Okay. Has that been your experience with BC politics as well, Karl?
Well, I suppose so. Of course, being on the other side, you see the demographic move differently. But certainly in non-urban area, in places that are, the Kamloops and the Kelowna and you name them, it is a trigger. That's for sure. It is a trigger and can go back significantly. But in the case we're facing right now, there's no leader in the country that's stepping up against Bill 96. Jason Kenney came out in favor.
Yeah.
So who else? I mean, the Quebec Liberals are in favor. The only ones who are opposed to it seems to be the Parti Québécois because it doesn't go far enough. So everybody else is like, well, if the PQ is saying it's not strong enough, then it must not be so bad. So the political traction lies with the amendment to the Constitution and how it's going to play out. And if ruling starts to happen based on that, but that's a fair bit down the road.
Okay, we'll be back with part 2 of your political fix coming right up on the Rob Snow Show on City News.
I wanted to give gifts to my volunteers, so I started making. I knew this is a skill I had, so I made chocolate that had a cultural based with a teaching, because culture here is not just a little part, it's the large part, it's the fundamental part of our organization. So then we started doing, just little programs, and we sell a few at a fair, and then we started getting contracts. People were starting to enjoy the chocolates, and started getting more and more contracts all across Canada. Then we decided to become a social enterprise, and we were able to create 2 jobs, and Val is one of our chocolatiers, very talented. We were able to help her with employment.
We started just with a little bit in the kitchen, doing a little bit of chocolate together, and next thing, it's just kind of taken off. And it's great because I love to be creative, and we get to create a lot and make up stuff, and it's just I just love it. It's just great that we get to make money back for Wabano, and it's helping me out, and we're helping just everybody out, Wabano and everything.
We met a very socially conscious business owner, being around town, and we decided to partner, because beans and chocolate, coffee and chocolate are sort of created the same way, and there's and they're very one origin bean, so it was a good pairing together, and it's been a fantastic partnership for both of us.
I was fortunate enough to get introduced to Purat, the head of Wabano Fine Chocolates, through a local networking group. And I was completely intrigued by the social enterprise that she was running, and then I looked at what we were doing, trying to support local business and supporting local communities, and it was a perfect match, and it's been fantastic ever since.
We make every batch by hand. We temper it by hand to get to the consistency it needs to be to make a good chocolate. And one of the best, also wonderful things we did, we've connected with Ed, with Being Around Town, and our coffee bars have been amazing hit. So we're really excited about the connection with our coffee.
Fun
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News 101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
Back with your Political Fix Part 2 on this Wednesday morning. Talking politics with Karl, Belanger, and Jason Lietaer here on City News. So Avi Lewis is taking his leap, so to speak. He is going to run. He's been acclaimed. Star-studded event. I mean, Jane Fonda, my goodness, does it get any better than that? Showing up to talk about your candidacy. For Jane Fonda, holy cow. For the NDP in the next election, okay? This is like NDP royalty here, Avi Lewis. But does he really have any intention to win, just given the riding, okay? It is West Vancouver, Sunshine Coast, Sea to Sky Country. I have that West Vancouver, Sunshine Coast, Sea to Sky Country, where it appears to me, looking through the history of this riding, not being too familiar with it, okay? This is not what I would call an NDP stronghold. The NDP finished fourth in that riding in the 2019 election. What do you think, Karl, of the decision here by Mr. Lewis?
Well, first of all, I always applaud when a candidate with some name recognition, and definitely Avi Lewis does have name recognition. He comes from a great political family, son of Stephen, grandson of David Lewis. Step in and throw their name in the ring, because it is a ring. It is a fight. It is nasty out there when you run for office. Social media is an example. Ever since he announced his candidacy, he's being jumped on from all kinds of corners. So my hat's off to Avi Lewis for doing that. I hear what people are saying about his choice of riding. It may feel like an odd choice. At the same time, that's where he lives. That's where he is established.
So if he had picked somewhere else, we'd be saying, wow, he doesn't even live there. He doesn't even live there.
Oh, yeah, he's so cynical.
Parachute candidate,
Exactly. So I kind of appreciate the fact that he wants to fight for the people he lives with, around him, his community, his neighborhood, is riding. I think it's underappreciated when people do that, as opposed to, well, I'll pick that very safe seat here in Westminster Burnaby, which has been New Democrat forever. Like that, I appreciate. Now his chances of winning are better than for the NDP now than they were before Avi Lewis announced.
Okay.
Because people do appreciate some candidates of a certain stature, and you never know how people will turn up at the voting station when you have a real legitimate star candidate showing up. Certainly it's good news for the NDP elsewhere too, because it shows that Jagmeet Singh is able to attract star candidates. The downside, of course, is that Avi Lewis comes with some baggage that play out in a dramatic fashion in the 2016 convention, which ended up turfing Tom Mulcair, and part of it was because of the LEAP manifesto that he helped draft and publish, and that was a key part of the narrative that sunk Tom Mulcair's leadership.
Okay. What do you think, Jason Lietaer? Avi Lewis's leap.
Well, where do you start? He's a legitimate radical, and I don't mean to say that to be derogatory. I would say that, he and Naomi Klein are, the shock value sort of like they're on the fringes of even NDP policy thought. There's a reason why they called it the manifesto, right? Like it's that was a deliberate choice, the way that they named the LEAP manifesto, and it was very, very, very controversial, and it's sort of a left-wing communist totem, really, if you want to, for people who really want an activist government, and there's a lot of people who are of that mind, and so he's sort of a symbol, and he's been this. Him and his wife have been, I would say, like, sort of that kind of symbolic leader of that sort of out there far left thought, and the question is whether or not he can harvest his celebrity, his roots, get into sort of real politics, some compromise. Let's be honest. He's not really known for, getting along with people and being part of a party apparatus and making it work. He's not used to all of those things. I actually think he's a better activist than he is a politician so far, and we're going to find out whether or not he's able to convince the people from, sort of West Van up to Whistler that he needs to be in Parliament. Now, I think he's got an outside shot, but the thing is, the Liberals are pretty good out there. The Liberals, I think, hold it provincially as well. It's a pretty diverse riding in terms of demographics. So, listen, okay, I'm with Karl. Good on him for putting his name on the ballot. A lot of people in his position just mail it in and send out a press release every couple of years, and that's it. So, good for him.
Okay.
I think he's in tough, though.
Okay, let's talk beer. Twitter eruption. Aaron O'Toole goes for a run. His wife offers him a beer when he comes home. He takes the picture. Here's me holding my beer that my wife gave me. And people freak out. I don't know. People will freak out about anything on Twitter. I've always said Twitter is not the real world, and you should not spend any time on it. And if I didn't need it for work, I wouldn't spend any time on it. But what do you think? Did he do anything wrong, Karl? What do you think?
I thought it was pretty innocuous, and the overreaction over it was, really symptomatic of what Twitter is about, which is a circus.
Rage,
yelling at each other 24 hours 7 while drinking. So it's really not relevant, but it shows that when you play, in the sandbox, you'll get sand splashed in your drink, and that's what happened to Aaron O'Toole.
Yeah, that's the worst. Jason, what do you think, Jason?
Come on, right? I mean, just come on. I really do think, not to make too serious a thing about it, but I saw, quote unquote serious journalists, is Aaron O'Toole misogynistic because he's what are you guys talking about? People are on Twitter screaming about he likes his wife barefoot and pregnant. It's just what are you talking about?
You are overthinking this. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, guys, he thanked his wife for bringing him a beer because he was thirsty after. And I thought it was sort of funny what he did the next day. Sort of, I got home from my run and I took my wife a glass of wine today, and people are just.
And then people were mad at that. Yes, it's like
you just got too much time on your hands. Get off Twitter, go outside, go for a bike ride.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV.